Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily, presented by Amazon Prime for February 4th, 2026. I'm Dave DuFour here with Es Baraheni. Coming up, we had another trade. James Harden's been traded to the Cavaliers for Darius Garland. Danny Cunningham is here to talk about the Cavs side of the deal. And our man, Lawrence Murray, Law Murray, is in town to talk about the Clippers. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, guys. How's it going? I mean, Danny, I don't know how it's going for you, buddy. Danny Cunningham from the LockedOn Cavs podcast. Probably a bit of a shock for you to now be covering James Harden when this wasn't really on anyone's radar until 2 days ago.
Yeah, when the trade deadline approached, I guess, which still hasn't gotten here, even though it feels like every team in the NBA acted like it was Tuesday and
today
not
was
Thursday.
nuts. Yeah.
Right, like it was insane. As this trade season approached, I thought we could see the Cavs get a little crazy, but I didn't think Darius Garland, I certainly did not think James Harden would be part of that equation. So nuts is certainly a good way to describe it. I think that this is a move for the Cavs that is just like, hey, we didn't actually believe or we had to stop believing, I guess would maybe be a better way of putting it, in the core four that they assembled, that they had, believed in since Donovan Mitchell arrived in Cleveland, and even with Garland and Mobley and Allen dating back before Mitchell's arrival in Cleveland. So this was certainly, like, if you would have told me this a month ago, I think I would have been a lot more stunned than I am sitting here talking to you guys about it now, just having time to process a little bit, but wild nonetheless.
How much of the calculus is the issues that Garland has dealt with injury-wise over the last couple of seasons, and not necessarily knowing what you can get from him in the playoffs coming up and in the future?
I think a lot of it, because I still do look at what was with Darius Garland when he was healthy and at his best, and what that Cavs team, and I know that last year's team is not this year's team, but what the ceiling of that group was, particularly offensively with him as the engine, is through the roof. And this year, he was not the same guy. There were glimpses of it, right? Like, we've seen him have good games this year, but the fact that now he has a toe injury on his other foot, it's hard for me to look at this situation and think that if Darius Garland were fully healthy, if he didn't have the issues he had in the playoffs last year with the left foot, didn't have the issue with the foot on the other side, the right foot now, it's hard for me to think that trade gets made. But the Cavs are ultimately in a spot where they have pressure to perform. They have pressure to, advance in the playoffs in an Eastern Conference that is wide open right now. And I guess the question becomes, well, who do you trust more? Do you trust James Harden in the playoffs, or do you trust Darius Garland to be available and at his best in the playoffs?
It's a tricky
question.
That's a tricky question.
I don't know. I don't know that either of them are great answers, but I can at least expect James Harden to be available. And I think that is kind of the thing that puts this over to the edge, is James Harden, for all of his shortcomings, and he has some, right? Like, he's not a proven playoff performer by any stretch of the imagination, at least not recently. But he's going to be out there. And I think that is something that does matter in this conversation.
Well, I'd say it's safe to say, you look right now, they're basically tied for the 4 seed with the Raptors. This puts them into home court advantage territory. I mean, James Harden is a guy, to your point, he's going to play. Their offense is going to crush. He can run pick and roll with Jared Allen. He can run pick and roll with Evan Mobley. He's not going to do much, though, when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. I mean, how is the offense going to account for adding a guy who it really isn't that dissimilar from Donovan Mitchell? I mean, James Harden doesn't play in the mid-range as much as Donovan Mitchell, but so much of their game is similar.
Right. I think that is one of the fascinating things to find out, is how do these two look playing next to each other? And I do think what is interesting is because we know what James Harden looks like alongside a lot of different really, really good players, right? Like, the last couple of stops he's been at, he's not been the best player on the team. He's not been the best player in LA when Kawhi's at his best. He was not the best player in Philly when Joel won an MVP. Even back in Brooklyn, like, he was not better. Although Kevin, coming off of the Achilles injury, maybe was not peak Kevin Durant, but like, he was not the best player on those teams. He's not going to be the best player in Cleveland, but we've not seen him be the second best guard on a team. And I think that is something I'm fascinated to find out, because Donovan Mitchell right now is a better player than him. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So what that looks like, how they can find a way to mesh when they're on the floor together, I think is ultimately going to be one of the things that says whether or not this is a success. Now, the one thing this will, and I do expect this to happen immediately, it will solve the issues that the Cavs have had when Donovan Mitchell's been on the bench. Like, offensively, they have fallen off a cliff. They've not been able to figure out any sort of like good backup point guard situation. The Lonzo Ball acquisition from this past summer has been an absolute disaster on that end of the floor. So I do think that this is something, if nothing else, even if they don't figure it out to reach the same offensive peak when they're both on the floor, this can take a lot of the load off of Donovan Mitchell's shoulders. And I think recently, if you've been watching the Cavs, he has looked exhausted at times. And I think this is a move that should help to alleviate that.
Yeah, I mean, especially you see it. We've talked about this all season, really, Dave, when it comes to the load that he carries in the fourth quarter and how he's tried to will the Cavs back into some of these games. And again, the fatigue makes sense at this point in the season. I'm also curious to see how those two work defensively, because a lot of the questions around Garland and Mitchell were the fact that they were a smaller backcourt. And there were clearly some questions defensively as to like, hey, how are we going to attack? Mobley has to clean up so much for us. Jared Allen has to clean up so much for us. Do you think adding James Harden potentially exacerbates those issues?
I do think that just because James has the advantage over Darius in terms of sheer size, like that is one helpful thing. And
definitely
then,
a better post defender. Yeah,
he's a better post defender than Darius Garland. Yes, that is. I still remember those clips circulating from when he was in Houston. It's like, actually, he's really good defending in the post. He's not as bad as we all make it sound, even though sometimes it might have looked like his controller got unplugged when he was off the ball. So I do think that that's going to be something interesting. And it's worth noting here, too, like this is not the only change the Cavs have made. I'm really curious how adding a defender like Keon Ellis to the mix too can kind of help alleviate that, even though he's not exactly a big wing either. But I do think that when you talk about the defensive end of the floor, I think it's more so than just, they're swapping out Darius Garland for James Harden. They'll be a little bit better because James Harden is 6'5" and a sturdy guy compared to a 6'1" guy that has proven to be kind of frail. So I think like all of those things kind of needed to be added together there.
All of a sudden, this team has a lot of guard depth where they just were struggling all year to kind of find a way to replace Ty Jerome. I mean, I'm sure that by the time we get to the playoffs, we'll have an idea of what sort of lineup combinations they're going to be playing with. What do you see this team looking like when it's got its best five guys on the court?
I think its best five guys right now are obviously Donovan, and you've got James Harden, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. Like those are the best four. It's not going to be the core four that everybody in Cleveland called them when Garland was here, but that's going to be the best four. And then that fifth spot, I think, is something that's going to rotate based upon what the Cavs need. Like if they need offense and shooting, Sam Merrill might be that answer. If they need more of a defensive minded guy, it might be Keon Ellis. I'm not exactly sure how that fifth spot is going to go. Maybe it's Dean Wade. If you look at how good and the impact that he has, like he's never going to be somebody that blows you away with box score numbers, but like the impact he has had defensively, he's been one of the best defenders in basketball this year when he's been available. So I think that they have optionality with that fifth spot, which I think can be both good and bad. Like sometimes I think teams like to know, okay, when the game's on the line, these five guys are going to be on the floor. I think the Cavs have the answer for four of them, but that fifth one's just going to continue to rotate.
How do you see them stacking up against the rest of the Eastern Conference? Because obviously this adds a level of talent and availability in James Harden. You just talked about the depth that they've added at the guard spot with Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis. When you look at them compared to the Knicks, the Celtics, the Raptors, the Pistons, where do you slot them in now?
So I still think that they're in the middle of the pack because of that pack, I should say. Like, I know that they lost 3 games to the Raptors this year, and you have to look at what happened in those games. Like, nobody played for the Cavs in them. And that's part of the reason why they lost those games. And like, I don't mean this to be a shot at the Raptors because that's not the case. But like, if those two teams played right now, I would pick the Cavs to win a playoff series. Now we have to see what this Cavs team looks like. And we'll
as
know
a person who covers the Toronto Raptors, I would agree with you.
Yeah, I think that's the right call.
True. Yeah.
And by the time we get to the playoffs, we will have a lot more answers about the Cavs at this point, or at that point. But the way that I look at the Eastern Conference, Detroit has had this awesome season. And I know they had a really nice win over Denver on Tuesday night. But the Pistons are not a team that I think the Cavs look at and say, I don't think we can beat you in a 7-game series. The Celtics have had a season better than anybody expected. Same thing goes there. I don't think they're scared of the Knicks. Like, I think that they are not scared. And to be fair, they shouldn't be. And they got this treatment last year from the entire NBA. It was nobody's scared of the Cavs. Didn't matter they won 64 games. We need to see it in the playoffs. But I also think the Cavs are in a situation where, could I see them losing to the Pistons in the playoffs? Absolutely. Could the Knicks beat them? 100%. Can Boston take them down? Without question. Toronto's capable of beating them. Like, I look up and down the top 6 of the East, and I say the Cavs can beat every one of those teams. But I also say every one of those teams I think is capable of beating the Cavs too.
Didn't even mention the Charlotte Hornets if they somehow
last team to beat them,
so
Cleveland Cavaliers.
Hey, that's a scary team if I'm Cleveland. All right, man. Look, so we get the big deal out of the way. Probably. Do the Cleveland Cavaliers have another deal between now and the trade deadline that's a little bit over 24 hours away?
So I do think they have another deal. I don't know if it's the big deal that you might be insinuating it could be, but I do think before the trade deadline comes and goes, Lonzo Ball is probably not on the Cavs anymore. I do think they'll have to attach a second-round pick, maybe 2 second-round picks to get off of his $10 million contract. And then he does have a team option of $10 million for next year, which, of course, the team receiving him can either decline or could use that in a trade this upcoming summer. So I think at the minimum, that's going to be the case. But with the way the Cavs operate, like, I do believe that they're going to continue to make calls leading up until 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. Whether or not anything comes to fruition there, I don't know. I would have told you a week ago if you would have said, hey, the Cavs are going to trade James Harden or trade for James Harden, they're going to send Darius Garland, I probably wouldn't have believed you. So if you tell me the Cavs are going to trade Evan Mobley for Giannis Antetokounmpo, do I believe that to happen? Probably not, but I can't rule anything out at this point, guys.
Well, you heard it here first from Danny Cunningham of LockedOn Cavs, if it happens.
Sourced up.
All right, everybody. Stick around. After the break, our man, Law Murray, is here to commiserate about the James Harden years in L.A. Well, for at least the 4th time since I've been at The Athletic, James Harden requested a trade and successfully got one. Here to talk about it, our man, Law Murray, who is actually in Brooklyn covering the Lakers, and he has a flight to catch shortly to get back to L.A. to cover Cleveland versus L.A. So the Cavs and Clippers make a trade, James Harden for Darius Garland, and then they're going to play each other the day after. I don't think the trade will be official by then, so I doubt we see.
I think it
Harden
will be.
Play. Is Harden going to play? No way.
I doubt that Harden would play. I think that everything has to get processed. I don't think the trade hasn't been announced just yet. James hasn't played since Friday night, and it would be nice to practice. I think it would benefit the Clippers greatly if James were to just throw on a uniform after like they know how. I bet you they can't wait to blitz James Harden. They will not have the opportunity. This is unfortunately the last meeting of the season between Cleveland and the LA Clippers. The Clippers went to Cleveland back in November when Chris Paul was on the team still. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think. I think the turnaround is a little bit too much to do all that. And Darius hasn't played in 3 weeks. So I don't think either one of those guys are going to play. I am much more interested in the fits that those guys have on their respective benches. I hope they're both in the building. I hope they both talk. Cleveland media at a disadvantage because, we are in a media landscape where outlets think it's cool to not send people on the road to cover the best league in America, but that's another story entirely. I am planning on being in LA, so I can't wait to see who's got to talk about this whole thing.
Law, I have to ask you, how did we get here? Because we have gassed up the Clippers for the last month. They've looked incredible. And now their second best player, arguably, is not on the team anymore. And Darius Garland, who knows what the injury situation is, whether he'll be ready at some point throughout the rest of the season. They probably need him to play because of that whole pick situation. How did we get to James Harden getting traded from this team?
I think it really starts with when he signed his contract, because this is what we need to talk about since everyone wanted to use the extension word for a guy who's not extension eligible. And I have to make this really clear. James Harden has sacrificed a lot of money. Okay. This is going back to, Brooklyn, going to Philadelphia, the Sixers getting hit with tampering charges because James Harden helped get PJ Tucker and Daniel House paid. he signed 3 contracts with the Clippers. Well, not signed, but he got traded there and then signed a contract and then opted out to sign the contract that he's on now. And he did the Clippers a solid. There was a partnership with that contract. And a big part of it is, what can we do to help get certain guys on this team to help give James, Kawhi, the rest of those guys a chance to actually make a playoff run? Bradley Beal turned out to be the solution and the validation for James Harden saving on the deal he's on now. You did not see Bradley Beal play a single fourth quarter minute for this LA Clippers team. And I think what happened in November with Brad getting hurt, with Kawhi getting hurt just earlier that same week, and the descent that the Clippers were on, they lost 19 out of 22 games. It changed everything. And look, the efforts were there by James, and once Kawhi got healthy, you've seen the run that Kawhi's been on. Thankfully, he's an all-star. That was great. They're in 9th place. And I think for James, he doesn't just request trades. He knows who he is getting traded for and where he's going and where the bag is. It's as simple as that. James Harden don't play that play-in tournament stuff. He never has. And so what materialized was a realization that moves can be made when you shorten the time for the requests. There's a chance that things get done as opposed to having things linger for a month. That wasn't the case here. I think everyone listened to each other and saw something. For me, it was a matter of, do you really think Darius Garland is the answer to anything? I'm not listening to a whole lot of that right now. I don't think we're talking about that right now. We're just talking about how James Harden wound up being in Cleveland. And the bottom line is, he identified where he needed to be for the 2 things he cares about the most, which is giving himself a chance to win a championship and making sure he secures his financial earnings as well.
Yeah, look, it sounds to me like Giannis should hire James Harden's agent. I don't know if that's like something that's crossed his mind, because that James Harden's agent has really figured this process out, wouldn't you say?
James Harden is the agent. I want to make
I was going to say, isn't James Harden self-represented?
Could James Harden just do this for Giannis?
Now, James is represented by equity, and those guys have been great partners with James, and those guys are very good at what they do. But let's just be clear, what James, his patterns have been, go long beyond the agency that currently represent him.
Right.
He is incredibly good. And I don't mean this as a backhanded compliment. James is really good at understanding what league he is in. That is the case on the floor. You've seen it with his play style. That dude is top 10 all-time scoring for a reason. Rules have been changed because of him. Play styles have been adopted because of him. Player and position archetypes have been adopted because of him. And it goes beyond the court as well. I think on the court, you're trying to win a championship, and off the court, you're trying to get the bag. And he has been Hall of Fame at both.
So Darius Garland is now a member of the LA Clippers. And obviously he's injured. But in terms of the trade that they made, basically a 1-for-1 swap, they got a point guard that is 10 years younger than James Harden, a guy who's a former All-Star. And obviously the potential is there. I think from my perspective, this feels like a no-brainer if you know a guy wants to go, which is what they essentially did. What do you think gives the Clippers the confidence to say, hey, we're building with Garland moving forward in the future, knowing that they have Kawhi, who's obviously much older, they have Zoo, etc. What gives them confidence in Garland moving forward?
The biggest thing with Darius Garland is that he's a professional. Like, this is a player who understands what it's like to be an NBA player. His dad played in the league. His dad played for the Clippers, amongst the few teams that Winston Garland played for. You're getting a guy who is a top 5 pick, so he came in with expectations. He has gone through adversity, both physically as well as being on a team that was not ready to compete and win until later in his tenure with Cleveland. I think he means a lot to the Cavaliers organization. And you're getting a player who offensively, I mean, he was the point guard on the best team in the NBA as far as offense last year. The Thunder were the best team overall. They had the best defense. But that Cavaliers offense was magnificent. And it was Darius working in concert with Donovan Mitchell. It was multiple pick and roll threats where Evan Mobley had his style of play, Jared Allen had his style of play. So that gives you confidence that you're getting a guy who understands what to do with the ball in his hands, can shoot the basketball, can play with stars. I think the Clippers are looking forward to seeing what he can do with a guy. He's not going to be playing with Donovan Mitchell. And before that, it was Colin Sexton, who was a ball-dominant small guard. The Clippers are not going to pair him with small guards anymore. Like, the Clippers barely want small guards to begin with. That's the interesting thing. But they were like, if we're going to get a small guard, I felt like that's the player that was worth it. They understood that they need to get younger. James Harden understood. Again, a partnership means that you have the hard conversations as well. And James saw that, and James saw an opportunity. And the Clippers, I think they had to take a deep breath here, because I think they liked the fact that they punched back and got themselves in a position where they're relevant again in the Western Conference standings. They would have wanted to finish this year with James Harden, but that doesn't work for James Harden. James Harden was like, I work real hard. I need to get to an easier situation, and you guys aren't going to pay me. So what's it going to be? The Clippers do still maintain some flexibility going forward. It's not like Darius makes so much that it cancels what you do, and he's a little bit more worth it because of the age. I have all kinds of concerns with Darius Garland, but in terms of what the Clippers are going to sell to their fan base, to their locker room, to their organization, they're saying we have a point guard in his prime who's a good player, and especially if you can get and keep him healthy, you have a player that it's like that's one position that you don't have to worry about in the near future.
Yeah. I know it's late out there, so I won't keep you much longer, but look, deadline, a little over 24 hours away. Are the Clippers done, or do you see them making some more moves before it's all over?
They can't be done. In fact, I wrote before this weekend that, obviously my understanding was that they prefer to keep James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. The trade value on those guys was not going to be something that elicits a whole lot of conversation. I wasn't right on that. You see that James Harden is on a new team. But independent of that, because it's a one-for-one trade, we're still operating the same way here. So that means that now instead of James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, it's Darius Garland and Kawhi Leonard. They're an incomplete team. They still need more firepower at the guard spot. They still have to take care of two-way contract players who have earned rotation spots in Jordan Miller and Kobe Sanders. One is a second-round rookie. The other is a second-round pick from 2 years ago that actually was promoted last year and is better now. They have two roster spots that definitely need to be dealt with in some way. Chris Paul is a player who's been on the roster and hasn't been active for 2 months, and so that needs a resolution. Kobe Brown is a player who was drafted in Jordan Miller's class in the first round. They declined his fourth-year option. It just makes sense to find a new home for him, and that is two players that can be turned into promoted spots for Sanders and Miller. And then Bogdan Bogdanovic just got back from a multi-week injury absence. He did not play in either one of these games that James didn't play in, despite the fact that they were shorthanded. I think that Bogdan Bogdanovic is a guy to look at as a potential player to move. They don't want to play him coming off of injury when you're shopping a guy. That's just obvious. We all see what that is there. So I feel like there's a lot of moving parts still. The Clippers still could upgrade. They still want to be good and compete. They have zero incentive to tank or anything like that. And so we will see what we get come Thursday, noon Pacific.
Yeah. Well, everybody go and read Law over at The Athletic. Again, one of the best. And thank you for coming on.
Sir.
We'll have you on the stream Thursday. Don't forget, if you're listening, join us on YouTube. We're going to be there all day streaming live for the trade deadline. Hopefully there's some trades left. And it's not just a trade recap show. Wow, they've been killing us. Too many big trades happening before the deadline. So please, everybody, come and check that out. For Danny Cunningham and Law Murray and Es Baraheni, I'm Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for hanging out with us.